I guess in my view, there were two big things this year that we wanted to accomplish. One was to find out where those metals were coming from.
Oh, how far back this piece goes. This is what we've been looking for. Oh, I might even go for a swim.
David, drain the swamp!
The crew at Oak Island found a shocking ancient map showing the land connected to a lost city, proving that the most insane treasure was a hidden history all along. This small island in Canada has coughed up hidden gems that make your brain spin, hinting at money and a past wilder than dreams. What is the real treasure buried deep in the unexplored caves that ancient civilizations didn't want anyone to find? Tune in, because these findings are the confirmation of an ancient lost civilization right under our noses. Whispers of ancient gold. Often the excitement begins with a special sound, a hopeful beep from a metal detector in the hands of Gary Drayton, Oak Island's well-known treasure-seeking expert. Gary has a special name for shiny, thrilling finds: Bobby Dazzlers.
Lincolnshire, England, and we always say Bobby Dazzlers, the shiny gold thing.
He once let Rick Lagina know that it was a local saying from his home in Lincolnshire, England, used for bright, gold-colored things. He even shared some background about the term, stories from London, about thieves using flashy gold and jewels to draw the attention of the bobbies, or police. On Oak Island, the term Bobby Dazzler has become famous in its own right, often meaning a clue that could alter their understanding. One of the most celebrated of these Bobby Dazzlers, a discovery that truly energized the team, was a remarkable gold-plated brooch. Picture the scene. It happened in the year 2018 on an area of the island called Lot 21. Gary Drayton was moving his detector over the ground with Rick Lagina nearby when that well-known high-pitched sound pierced the quiet. Gary would have indicated it sounded promising, his eyes showing his enthusiasm. Then, after some cautious digging, he would have expressed his great surprise at finding another Bobby Dazzler.
It's another Bobby Dazzler. Look!
Calling it a bloody brooch. And it certainly was an impressive brooch. This find led to Gary and Rick being called the Brooch Brothers, a friendly name that stuck and showed their shared joy in finding these kinds of personal, valuable objects. But was it genuine treasure? That was the most important question. To get an answer, Marty and Alex Lagina, along with their associate Craig Tester, took the brooch to St. Mary's University in Halifax. There, scientific experts Dr. Krista Brousseau and Dr. Xiang Yang examined it with their strong microscopes and analysis equipment. The team waited, their hearts likely beating fast. Rick inquired if manganese, a metal often present in older items, was detected. Dr. Yang informed them that it was mainly copper and zinc, typical for brass. For a brief time, their hopes might have lessened, as brass is quite common. But then they turned their attention to some very small, intensely bright spots on the brooch, spots that shone brilliantly even without magnification. Someone asked what these lighter spots were, wondering if they could be gold. The scientist aimed his instruments at one of these shining areas. He confirmed that the darker part was pure copper, which was noteworthy itself. Then, regarding the bright area, he paused before delivering the astounding information. He would say it was pure gold.
Bright area?
Yeah.
I would say it's pure gold.
Actual gold. Gary, who is known for his happy gold dances, would have been extremely pleased. Marty Lagina himself stated that he would have to say it was the first piece of verified gold found on the island, a first for their team for sure. Everyone was in agreement. This was real treasure. Gary Drayton's conviction about these brooches is about more than just their beauty. He has often stated that these Bobby Dazzlers are 600 or 700 years old.
These Bobby Dazzlers are 600 and 700 years old, mate.
That makes them incredibly ancient, from the 1300s or 1400s. He would stress that this is valuable metal, gold-plated and set with precious gems. He strongly believes these items were not simply dropped by later people looking for treasure. Gary once shared, his voice filled with conviction, how he would never forget the time he and Rick were the Brooch Brothers recovering these items. He truly felt that these Bobby Dazzlers were lost by the original people who brought valuable things to Oak Island a very long time ago. He created a clear image, suggesting that if you went to any castle in Europe and looked at paintings on the wall, you would see people wearing brooches very similar to the ones they found. For Gary, this was strong evidence that they were on the path of a medieval deposit of valuables, something of immense historical worth. The notion that such fine, costly items, hundreds of years old, were discovered on this out-of-the-way North American island is truly insane. It brought forth an entirely new way of considering the island's past. Who were these people, wearing gold-plated brooches, and what activities brought them to Oak Island so very long ago? These small, old gold items raised big questions about who was on the island long ago, questions that other parts of the island were also starting to pose. Uncoverings at Smith's Cove, away from the individual lots where items like brooches might be found, another part of Oak Island has always powerfully captured the team's attention: Smith's Cove. For Rick and Marty Lagina and their committed team, the hopes of finally understanding the island's 223-year-old questions have often been at their peak when working in this location. One of their most challenging projects ever was building a very large 525-foot-wide steel cofferdam around Smith's Cove. This enormous structure was intended to keep the ocean out, letting them dig in an almost 12,000-square-foot area of the beach. This spot had been explored, flooded, and looked at again by many people over the generations. Rick Lagina once talked about his feelings regarding this huge dig with notable openness, saying he felt a kind of boyish excitement to see things they had only viewed in pictures, to dig them up and observe with their own eyes the confusing and unusual U-shaped structure. That U-shaped structure was a primary focus. The well-known Oak Island treasure pursuer Dan Blankenship had partly found it way back in 1971, and it had remained one of the island's most intriguing clues. The team, using old photos and maps from Dan's earlier work, identified a spot near the northwest end of their new cofferdam where they thought the rest of this strange wooden structure could be. Marty reflected that it felt somewhat nostalgic because Dan had dug there in 1971, and they aimed to reveal it completely and hopefully share that information with Dan. There was a strong desire to recognize Dan's many decades of persistent effort. As the large digging machine started to remove layers of sand and mud inside the cofferdam, the feeling of anticipation was almost overwhelming. One team member looking at the dug-up earth remarked that there might be some things in there for Gary to find. And naturally, if there was any metal to be discovered, Gary Drayton was the person for that task. Another team member confidently stated that if it was there, he would find it without any doubt. Soon enough, Gary was at the location, his metal detector moving over a big old spoil pile, earth that had been dug up. It didn't take long for him to get a signal. He called out that he had a signal, a non-ferrous one, alerting Rick. Non-ferrous meant it wasn't iron, which made it more likely to be something more valuable, like brass, copper, silver, or even gold. Rick and others quickly came over. Rick asked where it was. Gary showed them the exact spot. As they carefully looked through the clump of dirt, Gary's detector focused on the target. Someone confirmed it sounded like non-ferrous material, and indeed it was. Gary, with a smile, let Rick do the final bit of uncovering. Then, as Rick gently cleared away the dirt, something shiny appeared. A voice expressed surprise, noting the gold color. Another agreed. The object was small, round, and certainly looked like gold. They checked its weight. It felt pretty heavy. Rick looked at it closely, wondering aloud if it had a milled or patterned edge. If it did, that would suggest it was a more recent coin. But after a closer look, that first thought changed. Rick revised his idea, saying he was not so sure about a milled edge. Marty agreed, and this was actually very positive news. If it did not have a milled edge, that was good because it meant it was older. An older coin, particularly one found in a historically important place like Smith's Cove, would be a very significant find. The show's narrator even posed the thrilling query, could it be a gold coin? Had the team found their first piece of actual treasure at Smith's Cove? The object was carefully put away, a definite top-pocket find, which is what Gary called his best discoveries. Marty expressed his eagerness to see what it was once it was cleaned up, his excitement evident. While it was not immediately identified as a gold coin, its look, its weight, its lack of a milled edge, and where it was found all suggested something extremely old and important. The U-shaped structure itself, when at last fully uncovered and studied, was eventually dated to 1769. That year is before the official finding of the money pit in 1795. This was a major revelation. It meant complex activities were happening at Smith's Cove earlier than many had realized, activities that could be directly connected to the original deep questions about the island. The age of the U-shaped structure itself presented a new layer to the island's complex history, suggesting activities long before commonly known events. The trail of heavy labor. While Smith's Cove was giving up its 18th century information, other areas of Oak Island were hinting at even older, more involved operations, suggesting a huge organized effort by people unknown. On Lot 15, archaeologists David McInnes, Aaron Taylor, and Liz Michaels were carefully digging at another unusual stone feature. Not too far from there, near the well-known swamp, Gary Drayton and Jack Begley were searching, hoping to find more clues connected to a truly perplexing find made earlier. An old Chinese coin. Gary explained that as they moved further from the team on Lot 15, they were actually getting closer to the swamp, a place that would have been crossed in old times by anyone moving between the money pit and the swamp. It did not take much time before Gary's detector made a loud sound again. He told Jack they had to dig that spot, as it was not a blasting cap, but a large piece of iron. After some digging, Jack pulled it from the earth. Gary let out a knowing laugh, exclaiming it was another ox shoe.
Shack Daddy, the mother of all ox shoes.
Yeah.
Jack confirmed it was indeed another one. This was not just any ox shoe, it was wide, designed for difficult work. Finding one might not mean a lot, but finding several ox shoes in a place not usually used for farming was very significant. Gary wondered aloud why oxen would have been in that area. He then began to see a pattern. He noted that if you lined them up, they seemed to come from the harbor and the swamp, heading towards where the team was currently digging on Lot 15. He mentioned the peninsula, the paved area found in the swamp, and now ox shoes in an area without much farming history. The meaning was becoming clear. If they started finding these in one area and if they formed a line, it could be an old track. Jack agreed, adding that it lined up right towards the old tar kiln. This was an energizing line of thought. Were they finding evidence of an old path, a route used by oxen to pull heavy loads? If that was true, it could explain the very large stone-paved structure the team had found in the swamp the year before, a feature that resembled a road or a dock. It might also connect to an unexplained anomaly, something big and not understood, that seismic scanning had detected buried about 50 feet deep in the middle of that human-made swamp. Gary told Jack with a smile to get back on track, adding it was a bit funny because he believed they really could be on an old track. Jack voiced his agreement. They kept searching along this supposed old pathway. Soon another strong iron signal came through. Gary remarked that he could see rust, which was a good sign, as Jack dug. Then Jack pulled out something truly out of the ordinary. Gary expressed his surprise, asking what on earth it was. It was a heavy, strangely shaped piece of iron with rounded ends. Jack guessed it might be a pin for pulling something. Gary held it, turning it over. He thought it was not a pin, but that he had seen similar things on horse and ox harnesses which had these kinds of knobs. He thought it might be part of the gear used to attach reins or other rigging. Gary observed that it was heavy, which he liked as it felt substantial and well made. He believed it was very old, from before the 1800s. For Gary, these discoveries, the ox shoes, the harness piece, were game changers. He explained that ox shoes were never really things to get too worked up about until you found them in the right situation. He felt they were definitely on some kind of oxen trail that led between the paved area in the swamp and the money pit. He was certain that some kind of hauling had happened along there. He pictured them on a track, hauling goods before there were any real roads or trails, clearly pushed to quickly make some kind of path and make their oxen use it. The image was of a large-scale, perhaps hurried operation, with people working hard to move heavy items across challenging ground. Jack Begley felt that everything was now starting to make sense. This evidence of a large, old operation pointed to a major undertaking, but the full story of who did it and for what insane purpose was still not fully clear. The ultimate understanding. At times, the most insane discoveries are not objects of gold or silver, but startling new ideas that change how we see the past. This became very clear during an engaging discussion that included Rick and Marty Lagina and the well-known actor William Shatner, who is a great history enthusiast. The talk moved from physical objects to the larger why of Oak Island, and a truly mind-stretching idea connected the island to the very start of a nation. Marty Lagina set the stage, talking about the beginning of the American Revolution and its definite links to France. He mentioned Thomas Jefferson's fondness for French culture and Benjamin Franklin's popularity in Paris. He then pointed to a key factor. Such conflicts needed a lot of money. Wars cost a huge amount, and he posed the question of how the American Revolution was paid for. Then came the striking idea. Marty suggested that perhaps there was a great collection of valuables on Oak Island. He proposed that maybe some of the founding fathers knew people who were aware of it and they were told it was in Nova Scotia. The timing, he argued, fits well. That part of Nova Scotia was starting to be settled around 1760. This was historically correct. He also noted that the French strongly disliked the British. So helping the Americans get these valuables would have been a politically smart way to act, as hardly anyone knew about this wealth anyway. According to this line of thought, the Americans came, did what they needed to, dug down, got the valuables, and left with the money. This was not just baseless imagining. Jack Begley added that the U-shaped structure in Smith's Cove, a significant construction, was dated to 1769, which is just before the American Revolution truly began. This timing perfectly matches Marty's idea of a withdrawal, an expedition to get valuables around 1770. Rick Lagina, however, often searches for a meaning that goes deeper. He stated with strong feeling that he completely and absolutely believed this was not about everyday wealth. He felt there might be such wealth, but it was not the main reason for what happened. For Rick, figuring out the motivation is vital. He believes that for any human action, you can understand the who, what, when, where, and how if you understand the why. He wondered what drives people. Perhaps faith, not just in a religious sense, but faith in their knowledge, their understanding, and the drive of a group of highly intelligent, motivated people. He thinks the original people involved, whoever they were guided by a strong belief system, not just a desire for riches. Marty, always practical, often gently questions his brother's more philosophical ideas. Marty once said with a smile that Rick thought it was wonderful that these people might have done some of these things based on faith. Marty then would say to him, yes, but what if it was not a smart idea? He meant that faith is not always the ultimate answer. This friendly disagreement between the brothers shows the different ways they look at the island's ongoing questions. But Rick remains firm in his view. He believes that when belief is combined with facts or hard science, that is where success is found. And he feels that these people, if this idea is correct, were successful in what they set out to do. We just need to figure out their reasons. William Shatner wisely contributed that when you find out what it is, you will probably know why. Oak Island's insane finds keep changing history, challenging our views. What amazing discovery will come next from its depths? Like this video and subscribe for more.